13th century. August 1281. Hakata Bay, Kyushu Kublai's fleet looms offshore, and Japan stakes survival on this narrow shoreline. Samurai do not charge for glory here. They measure distance, angles, and minutes, turning wet sand into a kill zone under cold wind. A low stone barrier cuts the coast into controlled lanes. It is not a monument. It is a mechanism built to deny the first foothold. Offshore, anchors strain and crews shout. The fleet needs one clean landing to become an army, one beachhead to start conquest here. Japan's answer is friction, watchfires, patrols, and night strikes that deny rest, deny order, and force the invader to stay afloat. Every hour offshore becomes a tax with interest-crowded decks, tired crews, strained rope, supplies trapped on wood, never on land. The invasion is already bleeding momentum. Without ground, sheer scale becomes fragile, and time flips from asset to threat overnight. Then the wind shifts. Waves rise, anchors drag, hulls collide, control breaks in minutes, and the sea begins to judge with raw force. No miracle, no mercy, only physics. A fleet that cannot stabilize, cannot fight, and the shoreline refuses to grant stability at all. Hakata Bay goes quiet after violence. The wall remains, the watchfires remain, and the empire's certainty cracks in the dark sea air. 1268. Messages from Kublai's courtland in Japan. Submit, pay tribute, accept hierarchy, or face a war delivered by ship and steel. In Kamakura, Hojo Tokimune sits at the nerve center, weighing one grim choice: bend and lose sovereignty, or refuse and invite landing. The shogunate's power is real but distributed. Warrior houses hold the muscle, and each must be mobilized without breaking the system. The threat is maritime. Kyushu is the front door, and Hakata Bay is the hinge where boats become an army and supply becomes conquest. Refusal turns the sea from boundary into highway. Once that route is proven, it will be used again, harder, faster, with less mercy. Tokimune's stake is not pride. It is national survival under a new pressure, coordinated fleets, allied manpower, and timed shock blows. Japan cannot win by bravery alone. A fleet is stopped by denial, denying anchorage, denying beaches, denying time to assemble safely. Kyushu's local lords become the first line, forced to react in hours, while Kamakura must coordinate in days across hard distance. Every coastal mile is a liability. An invader needs one clean landing site to start a chain reaction. Japan may never stop again fully. Tokimune pushes readiness into policy watch networks, musters, stockpiles, because hesitation at sea becomes catastrophe on land fast. The Yuan model is scale and momentum. It assumes resistance will splinter under fear, and political order will collapse when cities fall. Japan's model must be friction. Slow the landing, fracture coordination, and turn every approach into cost the invader cannot repay. Tsushima and Iki sit like stepping stones. If they fall, the mainland is exposed, and Hakata becomes the next target by geometry soon. The court's demands aim to isolate Japan diplomatically. Tokimune's refusal accepts loneliness as the price of autonomy outright. Now, by 1274, the crisis is locked. Submission ends the threat, but ends independence. Refusal preserves both, only if defense becomes system. Kamakura's decision triggers a national mobilization without a declared end date. It is not war yet, but it is not peace anymore either. Tokimune understands the hardest truth. The first clash will teach the invader the route, and teach Japan its own weaknesses fast. The stakes are absolute, an empire measuring whether Japan can be folded into its orbit, or whether its coastline can refuse power. This part sets the trap. If Japan denies the foothold, the invasion dies offshore. If it fails once, the next wave will be lethal. And so the shoreline becomes destiny. Kyushu watches the horizon while Kamakura builds discipline, stone, and readiness into law daily. November 1274. The crisis leaves parchment, and becomes movement ships depart Korea with one job: land in Japan and force collapse. The first blows hit Tsushima, exposed by distance and geography. Defenders rally, but a concentrated landing is a brutal mismatch. Tsushima falls fast, not from cowardice but from math. Shoreline control beats valor when the attacker arrives organized and dense. Next comes Iki, another stepping stone seized to push the supply line forward. The sea corridor is being built, step by step, in blood. With the islands taken, the fleet turns toward northern Kyushu. Hakata Bay is the true hinge where boats become an army on land fast. Hakata is access roads, provisions, and authority. If a beachhead holds here, Japan is forced into a grinding defense with no pause. Local samurai surge to the coast in fragments, bands, retainers, provincial forces fast, but not unified under a single field command. The invader seeks density and rhythm, land in waves, form a perimeter, move supplies, expand inland. Success depends on synchronization. The defenders seek the opposite. Keep the landing thin, scattered, and exposed. Deny the invader a clean first night ashore, always. The fighting is broken space, shallow water, hard sand, narrow lanes where minutes decide if a foothold hardens into a base under fire. Offshore, ships must anchor, keep spacing, protect crews, and stage the next push. A fleet at anchor is fragile, not safe in daylight. Night becomes pressure. Without rest, order decays, and every delay multiplies consumption, fatigue, disease risk, and mishap at sea. The invader hits a hard fork: press deeper without a stable base, or pull back and admit the foothold cannot be secured tonight, ever. Weather shifts, and the coastline grows hostile. The sea that carried the fleet now punishes hesitation, crowding, and bad anchorage. Withdrawal is not mercy, it is calculus. Without ground, the operation bleeds momentum, burns supplies, and risks total disorder at once. The fleet turns away from Hakata, no conquest of Kyushu, no forced submission, no collapse of Kamakura's authority follows afterward. But Japan's relief is cold. The route has been proven, the door has been touched, and the next attempt will arrive heavier and longer. Tokimune reads the lesson. Improvisation survives once, not twice. The second strike will target every weakness revealed here. The first invasion exposes thin coastal infrastructure and fractured response. Denial worked, but barely, and at punishing cost overall. The true battlefield is the interface sea to land, where control decides everything. Lose that interface, and the campaign lives on. From this point, defense must become a machine. Barriers, watchfires, musters, and a doctrine of immediate punishment for landing. Every landing attempt must be taxed instantly. Every anchored ship must feel pressure. Every hour offshore must become real pain now. November 1274 ends, with certainty inverted. The Empire knows the approach, and Japan knows the threat is repeatable and real again. The story tightens. The next invasion will not be a probe. It will be a campaign built to break the shoreline's refusal by brute force. Hakata becomes a countdown stone, discipline, and readiness, built in advance, because the sea will deliver the next test without warning. After 1274, Japan does not reset. It enters a long alarm where the enemy is absent, yet the coastline still bleeds labor and time. In Kamakura, Tokimune must turn refusal into infrastructure. Intent becomes stone, schedules, stockpiles, and enforcement provinces. Kyushu lives, as the front line, in peacetime clothing watch posts, patrol routes, and forced musters aimed at one thing: deny the beach. The coastline is engineered like a weapon. Low barriers shape landings, forcing boats into narrow lanes where defenders can strike fast. Readiness becomes routine. Guards rotate, signals standardize, and supplies are dragged to the sea as if invasion arrives tomorrow. The human cost is continuous extraction: men pulled from farms, craftsmen pulled to build, food pulled to feed garrisons. Year after year, patrol duty is not glory. It is exhaustion under salt wind, nights without sleep, and discipline that must hold when nothing happens. The defense system consumes fuel, manpower, timber, stone, and patience. The state asks more while offering fewer immediate rewards. Samurai households absorb the strain. Horses, armor, and provisions stay staged near the coast, turning life into military posture. Local leaders must coordinate without friction. Fragmented authority is dangerous because an invader only needs one unguarded approach. Tokimune tightens administration inspectors, orders, and penalties because coastal defense collapses the moment discipline relaxes. The challenge shifts. Not can we stop a landing, but can we sustain the machine long enough without breaking society from inside out? A wall is not just stone. It is labor, tax, and obligation hardened into a line that tells every village the war is not over yet, still. Every month without sales is not peace. It is uncertainty that drains legitimacy while demanding constant readiness and sacrifice. Rumor becomes a weapon. Any sale on the horizon forces mobilization, proving how fear itself can exhaust a nation over hard seasons. Kyushu's nights become rehearsal. Small boats, silent approaches, quick strikes, and withdrawal before the fleet can react fully, ever. The aim is cumulative pressure, deny rest, deny order, deny confidence, so the invader never finds stable water, timing, land at all. These drills reshape samurai values. Personal display yields to coordinated denial because coastal war rewards system over ego first. The sea is a harsh trainer. Storms erase work, tides shift lanes, and salt eats rope and wood, demanding maintenance without mercy. Readiness is expensive precisely because it must be boring. The hardest orders repeat daily for years, with no applause or relief. Tokimune's gamble deepens. He asks for permanent vigilance without promising spoils, betting cohesion against fatigue and resentment. In the shogunate's logic, survival replaces conquest. The best outcome is nothing happening, yet nothing happening costs everything. Kyushu communities learn the edge of empire. They build, watch, and wait, knowing the next arrival will be heavier than before again. The defense posture hardens the shoreline and hardens the people. Both are shaped to refuse the first step of invasion without pause. By 1280, Japan is no longer improvising. It executes doctrine: deny anchorage, deny landing, punish any pause offshore hard, always. The enemy is not visible, but the system is alive. Patrols move, signals blink, and the coast stays armed like a loaded trap now, ready. This part proves the theme in human terms. Survival is purchased over time, and the payment is made in routine suffering, daily, blunt. The wall becomes a scar before the battle even returns. It marks a country that chose refusal and accepted the slow price forever. Tokimune holds the center by force of discipline, but discipline itself creates pressure that cannot be dismissed or forgotten later. And so the stage is set. When the second invasion arrives, it meets not a moment of courage, but a machine built to deny control. June 1281. The second invasion is mass in motion: timber, canvas, iron, food, water, men, an empire pushed across sea to force submission. Kublai's intent is not a probe, it is closure. The operation returns to Kyushu to finish what 1,274 could not make permanent on land. Northern Kyushu remains the gateway, and Hakata Bay remains the hinge. If a foothold forms here, Japan faces a grinding, losing equation. The invader's condition is simple: build a beachhead, land supplies, and turn boats into sovereignty before resistance stabilizes. Japan's answer is colder. Never let the beachhead form deny anchorage, deny time, deny rest, and punish every approach to the sand. This campaign arrives with greater scale and complexity. Multiple components must converge, and convergence demands timing and control. Timing is fragile at sea. Delay breaks rhythm, rhythm breaks landings, and broken landings force fleets to linger in exposed water. Hakata's shoreline is hardened now, barriers narrow options, watch networks compress reaction time, and musters reduce defensive lag. The wall does not win by itself. it shapes the battle, forcing boats into lanes where defenders can strike with ruthless speed. Offshore is not safety. Offshore is exposure anchors, lines, spacing, fatigue, and supplies all trapped on wood, not secured on land. Japan weaponizes nights. Small crafts slip out, strike vulnerable boats, and vanish, turning the fleet's rest cycle into constant alarm. The goal is not a single annihilating blow. It is cumulative disruption, fracture coordination, scatter landings, and deny stable rhythm. An amphibious landing needs density, waves, perimeter, supply flow, and command site. Japan makes each requirement expensive to meet. Every failed landing burns manpower and morale. Every retreat back to ships burns time, and time is the invader's most precious fuel. Crowded anchorages create crowded failures, communication slows, collision risk rises, and small errors scale into chain reactions. Fatigue spreads through crews that cannot sleep. Stores spoil an air, disease and stress feed confusion, and confusion kills control. Japan keeps the operation floating, because a fleet without ground is a force without foundation, costly, fragile, and time-limited. The longer the fleet remains offshore, the more weather becomes a weapon. Stasis invites storms, and storms punish stasis with violence. By midsummer, the campaign begins to fail before it fails. Denial accumulates, options collapse, and the timetable bleeds out daily. The invader tries to force the interface sea to land, but the interface is engineered against it, with angles, barriers, and pressure. Scale turns into liability. More ships mean tighter spacing, more anchors dragging, more collisions, and more chaos when wind rises. Japan does not need to sink everything. It needs the fleet to stay compressed, stressed, and unable to reset into a clean landing cycle. This is how a trap works. Deny foothold, force lingering offshore, amplify exposure, and wait for the environment to deliver the verdict. Operational physics replaces myth. A campaign that cannot stabilize, cannot impose hierarchy, no matter how vast the empire behind it is. Day by day, the invasion becomes a self-inflicted crisis consumption without progress, coordination without control, fear without relief. Commanders fight two enemies at once: defenders who deny landing, and the sea that punishes crowded fleets that cannot disperse safely. As August approaches, the fleet is still trying to win, but it is already positioned for loss offshore, exhausted and vulnerable. The defenders keep pressure constant, because time is now their ally. Each denied day increases the chance of catastrophic weather. The shoreline holds, the fleet drifts, and the sea tightens its grip. The campaign waits in a posture that cannot last much longer. This part ends on the edge of impact. The invasion is trapped offshore, and the wind is beginning to speak louder than orders now. August 1281 is not a heroic climax. It is a threshold, where control breaks and every offshore problem becomes fatal, fast, at once. Weeks of denial have done their work. The invasion remains afloat, compressed, exhausted, and without the one thing it needs: ground. A seaborne campaign must transform ships into a secure base. Without that transformation, every day becomes heavier, riskier, sharper. Anchors must hold, lines must stay tight, hulls must keep spacing. In crowded waters, one error spreads damage across the whole fleet. Japan's pressure forced stasis, night raids, coastal barriers, and relentless alarms that prevented rest and prevented safe dispersal. Stasis is poison at sea. It multiplies fatigue, spoils supplies, spreads sickness, and turns simple maneuvers into panic under stress. Then the weather turns violent. Wind rises. Waves build. What was friction becomes destruction, because the fleet cannot reset or spread. Anchors drag and ships swing into each other's paths. Collisions become inevitable, and each collision breeds more chaos in the dark. Ropes snap, masts strain, decks flood, signals vanish in spray, and command dissolves into fragments that cannot coordinate survival. Scale flips into liability. The more ships present, the tighter the spacing, the greater the collision cascade when control slips. Men cannot fight the sea with courage. They can only fight it with control, and control is exactly what the operation has already lost. This is not a miracle that saves Japan. It is the verdict on a campaign trapped offshore in the fragile posture of exposure, always. Tokimune is not on the water, but his choices shaped the trap: refusal into infrastructure, readiness into routine, denial into doctrine. The storm does what the defense demanded. It punishes compression, punishes delay, punishes the absence of stable ground to recover on. By dawn, the invasion is no longer an invasion. It is wreckage, scattered units, ruined supplies, and leadership stripped of certainty. Even ships that survive afloat become useless, damaged, displaced, unable to land, unable to sustain pressure, unable to impose authority. The campaign's premise dies. Water cannot be controlled like land, and a fleet is not power until it becomes a foothold with supply. Japan's shoreline remains locked. The wall still shapes approaches, and patrols still move, because caution is the only safe habit. When the sea calms, it leaves no victory parade, only confirmation that the empire's momentum has been broken beyond repair. Finally, the myth collapses into a cold truth. Deny the interface long enough, and the environment will finish what discipline began for you. After the storm, the coastline is still armed. The wall stands, watchfires blink, and Japan keeps paying for survival in silence still. Tokimune's surface victory is clear: no capitulation, no occupation, yet the deeper aftermath is political debt with no easy payoff. A warrior regime runs on reward, but a fleet broken at sea yields no new land, no rich spoils, and no clean trophies to distribute. Service demanded years of labor and risk. Compensation is thin, and thin compensation turns loyalty from certainty into negotiation. In Kamakura, defense becomes fixed policy. Fortifications maintained, patrol rotations enforced, stockpiles held, readiness sustained. The fear is structural. If the route was proven once, it can be attempted again. Vigilance becomes habit, and habit becomes burden. Kyushu communities live beside engineered refusal. The shoreline is no longer scenery, but a front line etched into daily life now. The victory myth hides the bill. Stone walls cost labor, watch networks cost sleep, and constant musters cost farms and households. Tokimune's system saved the country, yet it also drains the regime, extracting resources without the relief of conquest or expansion.